Hey everybody, Griff Hamlin here. Welcome and thanks for joining me. In today's video, we are going to talk about really the thing that makes the guitar the coolest instrument on the planet, and that is bends. We can execute bends better than anything, and there's so many great places to do the bends, and that's what I want to talk about today. Bending in and of itself, for most people, is a fairly straightforward endeavor, meaning you're going to grab a note. Let's say we're playing good old box 1. So let's say you grab, the 7th fret on the 3rd string and you want to bend it up. It's going to be hard to do it with one finger because that finger's got to both push the string to keep it against the fretboard and push it up. So we have a couple of helper fingers. My 2nd and 1st finger are going to jump in. Now I can bend it up, okay? Now the key to a successful bend is a very, very simple concept. You have to bend to a note. Let me say that again. You have to bend to a note. A bend is not some random arbitrary thing. A bend is a way to take the pitch from what it is to what you want it to be. But it still has to be a pitch. It can't just be anything. It's going to be a pitch. Whether or not it's a good pitch is up to you. Okay, so when you bend, it's going to be a note. Whether or not it's the right note or whether or not it's a good note, that all boils down to how well you bend it. So what we want to think about is, all right, if I bend this up, how far do I want to push? Do I want to push it up so that it sounds like the note 1 fret or 1/2 step higher? Cool. That's great. But don't do that when you mean that. Okay, so it takes some practice. What if I want a whole step higher? You want to bend it up until it matches. Don't do that when you mean that. Okay, so you can go from here, up a 1/2 step, up a whole step, down to a 1/2 step. You can move all around. Okay, very Albert King or David Gilmour, is to take one note and do 2 bends with it. But what's important about that is it's 2 distinct notes that are within the scale. Okay, so the trick is knowing where in the box pattern. If we take the box pattern, it's easier to just go, okay, well, which notes within the box are the ones that work? And the ones that work are the ones that have a neighbor that's a whole step away. And those are, in general, the ones on, I'll say, the body side of the box. So on the top string, this note has a note a whole step away. So I can bend it, no worries. If I try to bend this one, I got to bend it all the way up to here, and I got to do it with only my 1st finger. Not going to happen. If I try to bend this one, well, the next note is here. So that's no problem. If I try to bend this one, I got to, again, bend with my 1st finger a step and a half. No thanks. If I go down to here, this one, again, there's a note a whole step away. Cool, I can do that. Now this one does have a note a whole step away, but I'd have to do it with my 1st finger, which is a challenge, I won't lie. Or I do it a 1/2 step if I'm sort of doing that major tweak thing that I talk about a lot. But again, it's a 1st finger bend. You can do it. Okay? This one here, now I'm kind of out of bending range because the next note from here is here, which is a step and a half. I'm almost going to run out of fretboard to get that. Okay, so this one here, again, I could yank it up, but man, it's a challenge. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to stick to the notes that are commonly bent that are going to sound good, that you're going to execute on you're going to be able to execute well. Okay, so in general, that is the top, the very top, the top note of the second string, the top note of the third string, and maybe the lower note on the third string. If you get the blue note, by the way, you might just be doing a half step bend there. Okay, now if you look at something like box 2, the top note here, you can do. That lower note you can, but again, it's a first finger bend. Same with that one, it's a first finger bend. It's almost easier to switch back to box 1. This one here, it's a step and a half bend. It can be done though, but it's a little bit of a challenge, okay? Again, step and a half bend, it starts to become more difficult. So there's not a whole lot of really solid bendable notes in box 2. It sort of just doesn't really work out. And that's okay. You know, it's not the end of the world. Box 3, box 4, some great places in there. Box 3 is one of my favorites, actually. That top note, you have to do a step and a half to get it, but I actually really like that sound. That, again, the higher note of the 2 on the second string, it's a whole step. The higher note on the third string, it's a whole step. Okay, on box 4, the very top note has a whole step above it. The lower one has one. This lower one down here, that's a step and a half. But it's on the third string, so it can be done. Again, the lower note on the third string you could do with a first finger bend, but it's a little bit of a challenge. On the 5th box, the top note is the root. You can bend that, but man, that's a step and a half. It's a tough bend. If I go to the lower one, I can bend it, but it's almost easier just to be in box 4 for that. This one here, again, I have to do a step and a half, so box 5, again, just not a lot of comfortable bends. It's not that you can't do them, they're just not the most comfortable things. So in general, box 1, the top note of the first, second, and third strings, great places to bend. Very standard, very easy to execute by comparison. They're going to work out great. Box 2, there's not a lot of options. Box 3, the second and third strings, the upper of the 2 notes work great. Box 4, top string, second string, great. No problem, they're a whole step. Box 5, not really. There you go. That's it. That's the whole list of common, easily executable bends. So I hope you'll, kind of, when you're playing around with stuff, if you find yourself bending something going, man, that doesn't sound good, maybe it doesn't fit in with one of those places. And so maybe you're bending up a whole step, but there isn't a note a whole step above what you're bending, okay? This is a common problem that I see time and time again with students that come in and they're like, yeah, my bends just sound lousy. And I listen and I'm like, well, it's because you're bending to a note that isn't there. You're bending to a note that isn't in the scale. It's not something that your ear is expecting to hear. And it's really easy to get hung up on, what's supposed to work. I get it. It's blues. Whatever sounds good works. But what sounds good is the stuff that you've been listening to your whole life. So you want to do stuff that sounds like what you've heard your whole life because that's what your ear is accustomed to. So when I say this is something that's common and this is customary and this is kind of what we do, that's what I mean. We're building on the legacy of the last 100 years of guys that have played it this way, and it worked. And we know it worked, so we can just do it and we don't have to think about it. That's not to say there aren't other ways that'll sound good. And if you find some, great. But this is a great jumping off point. All right, so hopefully you get something out of this. Hope you've enjoyed my little talk today, and I'll talk to you soon.